Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be looking at this Cupra Leon Estate 310. Under this bonnet we have the familiar EA 888 engine, which is a 2-litre turbocharged 4-pot. Essentially the same engine you'll find in the top of the range Formentor, the top of the range Cupra Leon hatchback, and cars like Volkswagen's Golf GTI, the Volkswagen Golf R, etc. In this particular car, it produces 310 horsepower and 400 newton meters of torque. All of that power and torque goes through a DSG 7-speed gearbox, and as we've just talked about, it's fed to the ground through all 4 wheels on this particular model. So it should be a really good all year round weapon. In terms of performance, well, Cupra claim that it has a limited top speed of 155 miles an hour and a 0 to 62 sprint time of just 4.9 seconds, which is the same claim that they had with their top of the range Cupra Formentor that I tested a few months ago. And I found that to be more like 4.7 seconds, and that's not unusual in this day and age. Cars always tend to be 1 or 2 tenths quicker than their claimed time. And I'm not expecting this to be any quicker, in fact, because it's almost identical in terms of weight to the Formentor, which does get me thinking, because you'd think the bigger SUV would be substantially heavier, but actually I think there's about 5 kilos in it, so next to nothing. Looks wise, well, I'm not entirely convinced. I do love a fast wagon or estate, but I think this could be mistaken for a regular Seat Leon estate in a fancy colour with slightly bigger wheels. And talking of wheels, well, I'm really not convinced by these ones. They've got really funny little plastic inserts in them, which just feel cheap and nasty. And even before you know about those plastic inserts, I'm just not convinced by the way they look. At certain angles and in certain lights, when it's a bit darker in the evenings, they don't look too bad, but yeah, I'm really not a big fan, especially when you see some of the other alloys that come on some of the other Cupra range, like the top of the range Formentor, and in fact, that recent Spanish plate Cupra hatchback that I had. I love the wheels on that, but these ones, they really don't float my boat. And I think my biggest issue with the way it looks is when you compare it to the previous generation, that Tuned by Apt one that I had was absolutely mega. It looked good, it drove well, it was the real complete package. I really loved that car. And I think when you look at that compared to this, well, this just looks a little bit ordinary. Thankfully, the trim model below this one, which is the VZ2 and the entry-level version in the UK, comes with more simplified 19-inch alloys. So the same size, but they look more like a regular sporty 19-inch alloy. And I think they improve the look of the car, and also obviously that model is a fair chunk cheaper. Yes, it doesn't come with leather and heated seats, otherwise the spec is very similar, and it sits just below that magic £40,000 mark here in the UK, which means you avoid paying a lot more tax over the next few years. In here it's all very familiar, feels identical to that Cupra Leon 300 hatchback that I had recently. Obviously that was on Spanish plates, so it was a left-hand drive, but otherwise the interior, the fit and finish, the parts bin, if you like, is exactly the same. I really like the wheel on these Cupras. There's a lot of buttons going on, but they're all fairly useful, and they don't extrude too much to the outside of the wheel like they do in Volkswagen's Mark 8 Golf, where I found I was fouling the buttons, especially when I was pushing on a little bit. The paddles feel a little bit cheap, but they work and they're fairly accessible. The digital dash, we've talked about this in a few Cupras. Although it's nice having 7 or 8 different layouts, you tend to just go back to the ones that look like analog dials, or at least I do anyway. So the one in the middle is probably my favorite, or the rev counter and the speedo. The traditional layout is my second favorite. The others to me are just completely useless and pointless, but they might suit others. The much talked about infotainment system. This has been lifted straight out of the Mark 8 Golf, and I'm not the biggest fan, if I'm being honest. I've spent a lot of time in cars with this setup. I just don't think it works particularly well. And even if you get used to the functionality of it, it does tend to crash. The one in this car has actually been quite well behaved, so maybe they've fixed some of their software glitches, but it does have issues. And just doing simple things like changing the climate control, etc., is way more complicated than it used to be when you just had buttons and dials. The driving position, well, it's pretty good for a Volkswagen Group car. I'm sitting here comfortable. I'm 6'4" for those of you that don't know, and I think this is good and will fit all shapes and sizes. These seats, they're just brilliant. I've talked about them before, and I really like them. I think they're actually better than pretty much all of the Audi sport seats. They just support you so well. They fit me very well. They could be a little bit bigger, but they just support my torso really well without being uncomfortable. Yes, they're not full bucket seats like the ones in my M3, but I think they do a really good job of being comfortable, looking good, and being supportive enough for when you want to take it out and go on a bit of a spirited drive. An option that this car has, which I do bang on about a lot in my videos, is the panoramic sunroof. And it's not an ordinary panoramic sunroof. This one is massive. So firstly, we have the nice and all-important blind, and that is all important because on a hot day like this, especially if you've got kids in the back, you need that closed to stop the kids getting burnt. And obviously over long journeys, if you've got the sun at 12 or 1 o'clock over your head all day, it will still get annoying through the glass. But once you've taken that blind back and you open the main bit of the roof, well, it's just glorious. It really is. And I've spent the past 4 or 5 days in this car driving around with the roof wide open, and although it doesn't open all the way to the back, it gives you a massive sense of openness in the cabin. If you've got a family or you've got people that are going to be regularly sitting in the back, having a pan roof just makes the back of the cabin feel much more spacious, as it does with the front, but really does benefit the people in the back. Let's close that because we're not moving, and all I'm doing is getting very warm air in here. You can probably see I'm sweating a little bit. Talking of that, let's get this car out on the road and see what it's all about. First things first, let's test out this car's acceleration figures. Cupra claim it will do the 0 to 62 sprint in 4.9 seconds. Conditions outside are pretty much perfect, although it is 32 degrees out there and I have the air conditioning blaring. I also have almost a full tank of fuel and I weigh close to 110 kilos, so it's definitely a fair test. Left foot is hard down on the brake, right foot is on the accelerator. My race box is ready, here we go. Oh, really hard off the line, absolutely no slip as you'd expect with all-wheel drive, and there we go. 4.68 seconds. Well, that's exactly the same time that I got in the Cupra Formentor 310 about 3, 4, 5 months ago. And that car weighs exactly the same as this. It's the same brand, the same engine, the same gearbox. So it really is no surprise that we got the exact same 0 to 60 time. Unfortunately for this Cupra Leon estate, about 24 hours before this was delivered, I handed back the BMW M5 CS. And that car is one of the best cars I've ever had the privilege of driving. And not only does it have close to 650 horsepower, it just seems to do everything so well. So anything that follows up that car is going to have a hard job of impressing me. This is one of those cars or packages that does everything really well, but nothing exceptionally well. So initially it's almost a little bit underwhelming because it kind of does everything you expect it to do. But its performance, its straight line pace, its brakes, its handling are pretty much up there with all of the very best hot hatches on sale today. Yet you've got that added practicality behind. I'd say it's almost in line or on par with the Golf R, which also happens to have that engine and this gearbox and this running gear, and in fact this pretty much is a Golf R underneath its skin. There is going to be an estate version of the new Mark 8 Golf R coming to the UK very soon, and I predict that it's going to cost about £1,500 more expensive than this Cupra Leon estate spec for spec. In my opinion, the Golf is undoubtedly going to look a bit better, a bit sportier, but under the skin they really are going to be pretty much identical. The Golf might feel a little bit sharper, and this might have a slightly better ride, which is probably and arguably more important here in the UK. You're going to have the same infotainment system, and in fact, where I think this excels is these seats. Although the seats in the Golf are really good, I actually think that these Cupra seats, especially for the lankier person, fit a bit better and also support a bit better. I think they look really good too. So when that Golf R estate does hit UK shores, well, you're spoilt for choice really. Do you go for the looks or do you go for the value? I mean, I don't know where the Cupra brand sits compared to Volkswagen when you think they're all under the same umbrella, but for me, I think it would have to be the Golf R estate without even driving it, just because I prefer the way it looks. It doesn't have these slightly weird alloy wheels, and I know I'm going on about the wheels again, but they really do very little for me, and I hope that Cupra bring an alternative to the market very soon, because I bet you these wheels do put off a lot of prospective customers. Another car I can compare this to that I've had on the channel fairly recently, and we've actually already talked about, is Cupra's very own unique Formentor. The range topper 310 has the same engine, the same output, and as we've discovered a bit earlier, exactly the same acceleration figures. But that car somehow manages to feel a little bit better on the UK roads and feel a little bit sportier when you throw it through some of the twisties. And I don't know how Cupra have managed to do that, because of course the Formentor is essentially this platform jacked up a little bit, so you'd think it would lose the handling characteristics and it wouldn't feel as good, but it somehow does manage to feel, if not as good, maybe even a little bit better. But that's not taking anything away from this car, and in fact, when you have this in the normal sort of comfort mode, the ride quality is really, really good. And when you put it into sports or Cupra using this drive select button down here, everything stiffens up and it feels really good when you throw it into a set of corners like this. It has a very good front end. Gearbox is pretty good. And when you put your foot down, well, it has no issues whatsoever. It just lays all of that 310 odd horsepower down without any issues. You've got reasonably big tyres, we've got 19-inch wheels, and obviously the weather outside is absolutely stunning, so it's finding all the grip in the world. I've actually got the traction control systems all switched off on this, because when I had that Mark 8 Golf R recently, I discovered very quickly that if you leave all of that turned on, it actually intervenes with your driving and becomes a little bit frustrating. Although I didn't have weather like this when I had that Golf R, it was a lot colder and a lot damper, so maybe it wouldn't have suffered in this sort of weather as much as it did back then. Guys, thanks a lot for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see more content on this Cupra Leon Estate 310 PS, please head over to my Yes Auto page. There's a link below in the description. In that video, I actually give you 5 reasons that I think this car as a package is the best for under £40,000 here in the UK. although this review hasn't been the most positive, and you wouldn't think I thought so highly of this car, when you consider that it's worth just under 40 grand if you get rid of the leather seats, well, there's not many cars out there that give you so much for that kind of money. And the more time I spend in this car, the more distant that M5 CS is, the more I learn to appreciate what it does as a complete package. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you at another video very soon. Cheers.